Hello, I'm Jane Vowles.
I'm Pami Natterson.
I am Sheila Ojeda.
I'm Kirsten Patterson.
I am Kamala Rampersad Silva.
This is Carlye Tsui. As CEO of this institute, I am pleased to be collaborating with other female leaders
who are working incredibly hard to improve governance practices in their regions.
It is noteworthy that even as the challenges of COVID-19 are impacting our governance practices,
in many boardrooms, women's voices are absent,
silent,
or go unheard.
Yet, it is clear that the economic impact of COVID-19 is devastating.
Not only in terms of the estimated $90 trillion lost globally,
but as we see happening in some countries,
emotions are running high with respect to dealing with very fundamental decisions
like economic recovery,
reopening borders,
vaccinations,
and freedom of choice.
We cannot afford to lose out on the contribution women can make
to solve some of these problems.
We welcome you
as you join us in this three-part series
on women in governance to bring positive change.
Positive change.
Positive change.
A change where we embrace all our voices
so that we can all contribute effectively to making governance worldwide more effective,
inclusive,
and diverse.
In other words, let's stop competing
and begin collaborating.
Let's help solve many of these problems.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm very impressed with the number of participants today. And indeed, I'm very honored to be invited to give a keynote speech at this session hosted by the Hong Kong ILD. I believe that notwithstanding that it is the last session of the series of conference, with the benefit of the insight and the great discussion of the previous speakers and also discussions, we'll be able to have an in-depth discussion of corporate governance policies that support women in this particular section. And hopefully, we will be able to arrive at some practicable recommendations for organizations, directors, and governance professionals. As some of you may know, I retired from the civil service in Hong Kong last September to take up my present appointment as the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data. Before that, I was the Registrar of Companies for about 13 years. And as a woman who has been working closely with many directors and governance professionals over the years, I greatly appreciate the importance and the contribution of women in good corporate governance. I believe that when we talk about gender diversity nowadays, and I think this has also been covered in the previous session of today's conference, it covers not only the participation of women in corporate boards, it also covers women's participation in senior management positions, and in some cases and for some countries, gender diversity across the company or organization itself. If I may share my slide with you. Yes. Back in 1998, a Spanish philosopher, Victoria Camps, who is a woman, published a book entitled The Century of Women. And she asserted that the 21st century, then about to begin, would undoubtedly be the century of women. We are now about 20 years into the 21st century, and I trust you will agree with me that women is playing an increasingly important part, not only in their traditional roles in the family, but also in corporate governance and practically all spheres of life. And this, I must say, include sports, when we had more than half of the athletes joining the Tokyo Olympic Games being women. I noticed that from the news report, I think about 2 days ago. And in terms of women on boards, in the past 10 years, if I may refer Susan as Susan 1 in section 1, she was not that optimistic, and she thought about the slow progress which we have made over the past 10 years or so. But I believe that although progress is not impressive, we did make some progress. And the figures of women's participation in boards have more than doubled, from below 10% in 2010 to just over 20% in 2020, according to a study conducted by Morgan Stanley. The situation is, of course, better, apparently better in Europe, where women represented 34% of all boards of directors in the 600 largest listed companies. And 9% of those boards were chaired by women last year. Plenty of research has shown the strong business case for gender diversity in corporate senior management and boards. According to a recent research by McKinsey, the most gender diverse companies outperform the least gender diverse companies by about 48%. Institutional investors have also shown a preference for investing in companies with diverse boards. Some of them, for example, BlackRock, have even voted against the re-election of directors at companies that fail to encourage gender diversity in boards. Put simply, gender diversity in boards is a win-win situation for everyone. And in Hong Kong, over the years, we did see an increasing number of women taking up senior leadership positions, which is, I would say, an encouraging trend. For example, according to a study published by the Hong Kong Chartered Governance Institute, formerly called the Hong Kong Institute of Chartered Secretaries, in March this year, a majority, over 70%, of the leadership positions in human resources departments of the Hang Seng Index group of companies, which comprises the largest listed companies in Hong Kong, were taken up by women. And in legal, sales, marketing, and PR departments, women were also reasonably represented in the leadership positions, with the presence accounted for over 30% of the leadership positions in those companies. The same study by the Chartered Governance Institute also showed that currently, across listed companies in Hong Kong, only around 14% of the directors are women, and nearly 1/3 of their boards include no woman at all. The level of women representation on boards in Hong Kong is still relatively low when compared to other jurisdictions, such as the UK and Australia, where the percentage is over 30%, and also in New Zealand, where I have learned that the percentage is almost 50%. I think in this particular respect, Hong Kong is not doing good enough, and we must do more. And in terms of corporate governance policies that support women, what can we do to increase gender diversity in corporate boardrooms? What policies can be implemented to support women? One of the most straightforward measures, also arguably a very effective one, is to set a mandatory gender quota for board composition. There were some discussions of having a target or a quota in the earlier section of this conference, but I believe that quotas and numerical targets can be very effective in increasing the number of women on boards in the short term. In some European countries, quotas were set by statutes a few years ago. As a result, women's representation on boards have doubled or even tripled since then. For instance, in Germany, a quota of 30% was introduced in 2014, and women's representation on top German company boards increased from around 70% in 2013 to 35% in 2020. And in Hong Kong, although currently there are no legal requirements for companies to fulfill a gender quota for board members, we have a quota-like policy in the public sector. In 2004, more than around 20 years ago, the government of Hong Kong set a target of 25% benchmark for the membership composition of statutory boards and advisory committees. It is one of the many efforts made by the government to encourage and to achieve gender diversity and encompass a variety of views and perspectives in shaping its policies. The benchmark has been rising incrementally since then, and a further target of 35% was set in 2015. The benchmark has proved to be very effective here because by the end of last year, 34% of appointed non-official members of statutory and advisory committees were female. Another common step, and I'm coming to my second policy here, that jurisdictions take towards encouraging more female participation in corporate boards is to require transparency in the reporting of gender diversity by companies. Some mandatory disclosure is already commonly required in ESG reporting. Although I believe that requiring companies to disclose the level of diversity and their diversity policies will help to push up the number of women participation on boards. I do encourage companies to voluntarily increase its transparency. I would appeal for companies themselves to increase the transparency in reporting, for example, their gender diversity policy, and also the number of women on boards to show the commitment from the top, especially when investors nowadays are placing increasing rate on diversity. And in Hong Kong, since 2018, about a few years ago, it is required by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange listing rules that listed companies shall have a policy concerning board diversity and shall disclose that policy in their corporate governance report. Companies with a single gender board will also need to provide objectives for the implementation of gender diversity in the future. And in April this year, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange went further by publishing a public consultation paper to review the corporate governance code and related listing rules. The paper proposed revising the listing rules, which would require all listed companies with single gender boards to appoint at least a director of the absent gender on their boards within a 3-year transitional period. While IPO applicants are not expected to have single gender boards, it is not really a quota requirement, but it would at least prevent single gender boards. Next, I will come to internal supporting policies. Apart from quotas and also increased transparency, we should also consider what can be done internally by companies to ensure that there are women taking up senior positions on a sustainable basis. And to this end, many have suggested that companies should manage the human resources to meet certain gender diversity targets or gender balance KPIs. In fact, the Hong Kong EX paper, which I have just mentioned, also included a proposal that all listed companies would be required to set numerical targets and timelines for achieving gender diversity at both the board level and across the workforce, including senior management level. And in this context, I believe that proper recruitment and promotion policies are essential. Companies may implement recruitment and promotion policies which encourage the sufficient presence of women in top managerial positions, as well as actively recruit qualified women to replace outgoing male board members. And by saying this, I do not mean to offend our male board members. On top of this, I think training and also mentorship is also important. Companies could also develop training programs and mentorship programs which equip talented young women to climb up the corporate ladder and to rise into management positions. I will now come to the last policy, corporate policies which support working mothers. I think when we talk about gender diversity and women's participation in senior positions, we cannot ignore or forget about working mothers, because motherhood is frequently cited as a major issue that may hinder women staying in their jobs or diminish their chances of moving upwards in the corporate ladder. A family-friendly work environment will be crucial for retaining female talents. For example, flexible working hours and family-friendly work policies are some of the human resources policies that companies may implement. They may allow working mothers to more readily strike a reasonable balance between family and work responsibilities and prevent them from leaving the workforce. Here in Hong Kong, we have had more labor policies supporting working women in recent years. For example, since December last year, our statutory maternity leave has been extended from 10 weeks to 14 weeks, which is more than 3 months. And more recently, in June this year, amendments were made to our sex discrimination ordinance to protect breastfeeding women from discrimination and harassment. And this expressly covers discrimination and harassments from employers in a workplace context. The amendments will help create a more family-friendly environment for working mothers with a newborn and enable them to stay in the workforce or rejoin the workforce while breastfeeding. Over the years, as Carlye has mentioned in the opening, in Hong Kong IOD's annual Directors of the Year's Award, the Institute also gives recognition and prizes for companies which excel in board diversity. And this has helped to create and promote a good culture of board diversity locally. Female presence in leadership roles has also been on the rise in the public sector of Hong Kong in recent years. I think most of you are aware that the current chief executive of Hong Kong, Mrs. Carrie Lam, is the very first female chief executive elected in Hong Kong. And I think this holds true for New Zealand as well, because I noticed that New Zealand's Prime Minister is also a female. And in Hong Kong, one of our 3 most senior officials in the government, the Secretary of Justice, is also a woman. Incidentally, I also noticed that the chief executives of the 6 institutes who are organizing this series of conference are all ladies. Congratulations. I think the conference has been very successful so far. To conclude, companies nowadays have everything to gain by improving gender diversity on the boards. I think it is of crucial importance that governments, regulators, and companies themselves give some serious consideration to corporate governance policies that support women, put those policies in place, and implement them effectively in order to achieve a win-win situation for all. And with that, may I wish you all a very fruitful and inspiring discussion for the rest of the conference. Thank you.